We are on week 2 of our live mini course, and we're looking at tending our garden and what this living framework is that we created. I wrote 3 books, a workbook series called Key Steps to Live a Happier and Healthier Life, and it uses DBT, dialectical behavior therapy principles that we grouped into kind of let life present, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. And having these 3 key components that dialectical behavior therapy has given us, I came up with a lot of lessons. Part 1 is really about it really is a guide to success. It's learning what it is our values are, and then all the things that get in the way of why we can't live the value driven life that we want. And then what we learn in part 2 series in emotional regulation is, again, why we're not present to actually do the value. So we understand the decision making in our health, in our work life balance, in our financial wellness, like it's all driven by anxiety. Then what we notice is in part 2 emotional regulation that all of our past experiences has caused us to shut down that emotional place that we're not really present with, which is allowing us to then get into these recapitulated patterns of stress reaction. And then in part 3, in interpersonal connectedness, we start to see how this all comes together. As we start to put ourselves out there in the world, why the world isn't showing up or how the world is showing up consistently because of our reactions. And it goes back to neurohumanity, 3 paths, 1 human story. Work, self, and relationships are all interconnected, and stress in one will cause stress in the other two. Healing in one will cause an opening of compounded growth for the other two. And all of that is what has built a foundation for what we call the living framework. When we pick all of those things up and we put it in a garden, and we realize just how predictable behavior is. And so we're going to learn more about tending our soil and know that before we can produce more, that it's time to restore our soil. So last week we looked at the landscape. This week we're looking at really the soil and how to mend the soil. So as we see that what we're standing in and what yard am I standing in, and we're looking at the landscape that we have for ourselves, we let go of the shame and the blame and that harsh inner critic that we get into. And instead what we're doing is we start to notice. We start to be more connected. We start to see what's happening. And then we're going to go another layer as we really look at the soil this week. And we're not looking at landscape, we're going to look at that soil. And it's how we're going to see how we're trying to produce fruit from soil that's been depleted for a very, very long time. What we try to do is perform, but we can't just be better. We can't get into the language of discipline. And we're often stuck in wellness programs in the bedrock of our mind of just do it, just work harder. This worked for me. My favorite, as I look at all these coaching platforms and people who are trying to sell their coaching, I realize that if you're like, there's not a lot of regulation on coaches, A, and B, a lot of coaching, even if you have certification, you got to go back to behaviors predictable. There is a reason you went for that certification. And so what a lot of people don't realize they're selling, which is a problem that they don't realize they're selling it, is they're selling it best they have as a trauma bond. That I got through this and this is how I did, so I'm going to roadmap it for you. I'm going to go through the hard stuff so you don't have to. And it's like, well, they may be in harder stuff than you are and that you are able to be present with. And so it's important to know and to be discerning, because oftentimes the people who are out there to help you may have just had the experience and they may be too close to the experience. That's what a master's and a license does for you. is it gives you a lot of ethics to say and to look at yourself. And even then, sometimes we're not as situationally aware of our own emotions, and those emotions come up. Reactionary emotions is the first part of the negative dynamics, exactly what comes up as we're trying to navigate through any stress situation. So, whether we're trying to show up at work, we're leading, we're parenting, we're trying to serve others, or create, or build, or perform, or communicate, it's understanding that while standing in the soil, we are not doing it from a grounded place. We could be tending our garden. It doesn't mean we're tending a grounded garden and the soil that is going to nurture our plants. So we're looking at restoring that ground underneath our calling. And before we can produce, we have to restore the soil. It's not about being laziness. It's not about being enough. It's not that you lack discipline. It's that sometimes your inner soil has been shaped by chronic pressure, by intergenerational messaging, emotional invalidation, survival roles, family patterns, inherited fear, perfectionism, scarcity, and old expectations that taught you to produce before you were ever allowed to be present. We're not digging up the past. I do not knock on doors. I don't knock on doors. We can treat everything in our past here in our present because it's showing up right here, right now, today. And if you don't mend the soil, we're going to be planting all of our new dreams on old survival ground. It's not going to get you where you think you are. Then you get into distress, so you avoid. So then what happens? Low value, low capacity, low motivation to want to do better. Remember, nobody can take that value and capacity away from you. It is yours, and we all have unlimited value and capacity. But what we do is we quietly reduce ourselves. And as we quietly reduce ourselves, what we find is that we're pouring concrete on that access point to where our value and capacity is. And so mending the soil is going to help us to access that place. As we get started, I love a good grounding exercise. So we have a lot that we want to talk about today. So just take time to take a deep breath, place your feet on the ground, really get those biscuits making with those toes, really find your sense of presence. Let your shoulders soften a little. Don't force relaxation, but notice that it's there. Notice that you're breathing faster, that you're trying to perform. Then just take that breath down, and you'll start to realize what is tight and where we can start relaxing and getting a deeper, more meaningful presence. And as you're taking that breath in, and you're letting it out, ask yourself, what has my body been carrying into work lately? Maybe it's pressure, resentment, urgency, maybe some dread or numbness. Maybe you need to prove or fear that you're falling behind. Maybe it's feeling like it's not enough. Just want you to notice it. I don't want you to fix it. We're not judging it. We never judge. Acceptance is there. Just quietly say to yourself, as you notice the narrative or the experiences or the energy that you bring in to work, I can notice the soil without blaming the seed. Also say to yourself, I can restore what has been depleted. Take that deep breath in, and as you let out, share with yourself, I do not have to force fruit from an exhausted ground. Each week in our Neurohumanity Framework series, so on Thursday, we'll have a kind of a day in the life, how we apply this to day, our Neurohumanity Framework, which is all about nervous system regulation and being present and letting life present and realizing that behavior is incredibly predictable because our nervous system loves consistency and predictability. And so it's going to show up every time because it wants that homeostasis. And so as we see that and notice these patterns, we have the AAA framework, awareness, acceptance, action, that really allows us to be present, let life present, and know that we had all the value and capacity to show up. And so what we're trying to do is on that Neurohumanity Framework Series Day on Thursday is we apply the lessons from today's session from our mini course. There's obviously a paid rooted model, so we actually have a rooted model to help you apply all of these lessons. It's free therapy. It's right here. And guess what? You get a free 15-minute consult as a paid subscriber. So not only are you getting some additional supports, but you're also getting a 15-minute consult to say, okay, so this is what I noticed this week. What does this look like? It's coaching. It's not therapy. It's coaching. And this week, we focus on those 3 paths, 1 human story. This week is work. Last week was relationships. Next week is going to be self. So although I talk about work in this mini course, know that relationships themselves are right there and all of it is going to be applied. You're going to be able to apply all of it in our rooted worksheet. So wherever you're at, that is where it's at. But we're going to talk about work this week. Because in the living framework, we're not only talking about your job, we're also learning about the output and talking about the output that comes from our work, that effort, that responsibility, the performance, the service, the productivity, the leadership, kind of what our purpose and calling and mission in life is. It's how you are contributing and how you are putting yourself out there for that value and capacity and seeing how it can be put out into the world. Not for outcomes. We can't control outcomes. Outcomes may happen. We can't control them. And for many people, work becomes the place where old soil gets really exposed. 95% of the time, we're all living in this bedrock where we have these defined narratives of what success is. And so we do exactly what it says success is. So for one of those, a common one is it's a school night. And it's a school night. If you think about what a school night means, we have a kind of a clear idea of what it is. It's to be prepared, it's to study, it's to have a good night's sleep, it's to have healthy food in our systems, nutritious, to fuel our body. Like we kind of know these are the things we do if we want to get good grades and be successful in school. And we avoid the parties, the drugs, the sleeping in, all the things that seem like you're just a bad student, you're going to fail, right? And we have judgment on these 2 things. That's the bedrock. They're boulders. We have several boulders. What it is to be a good friend, what it is to be a good parent, to be a good child. Like we just have these boulders of implicit messages we've been holding on to. And we just go and we just get into it. There's no nuances beneath the soil. There's no yes, but it is, this is the way, this is success or this is failure. And we'll talk later about the rot because I don't love failure because we do need that hypoarousal and the rot gives us that. And because work asks us to produce and it pulls us into the bedrock mind, it's going to ask us to respond, to meet expectations, to manage time, to navigate authority or receive feedback, to make decisions, to tolerate uncertainty, and to hold responsibility, to really have to be seen. And if your inner soil has been shaped in an invalidating emotional environment, work can become more than just work. It can become the place where old survival patterns start running the meeting. You may not just be answering an email. You may be trying to not disappoint someone. You may be not finishing just a project, but trying to prove you're valuable. You may not be hearing the feedback. You may be reliving an old fear that mistakes make you unsafe. And you may not just be helping someone. You may be reenacting an old role where you were responsible for keeping everyone else okay. So when we say mending the soil, we're asking, what ground am I producing from? Is it from fear, from purpose, urgency, scarcity, nervous system survival, old family roles, a deep desire to contribute, a belief that rest has to be earned, from a fear that if I stop, everything will fall apart? This is where awareness becomes powerful, because the same action can come from two very, very different soils. You can serve from love or from fear. You can work with purpose or from panic. And you can lead from presence or over responsibility. You can be dedicated or be driven by survival and feel like you have to be more disciplined. And so that fruit may look similar from the outside, but the soil feels very, very different in the body. And the nervous system is looking very, very differently in the body. So take a little bit to absorb this information and think about, and you can share this in the chat or in our comments or put it in your journal. Remember, maintaining a journal through this process, not only on Mondays where we are getting lessons learned for the week, but Emma's going to actually apply these lessons through our metronome metaphor. So we have a pendulum that we're kind of building out. It's just such a beautiful thing. Instead of seeing the body like a robot or a machine, which is how self-help has been kind of programmed to say, like, something is wrong with you, you have to have the right food, you have to have the right, mechanisms, your widget is wrong, this widget is better, all of these things are coming in, and they're causing us to think that we have to be more disciplined, to be more on it, to say that something is wrong with us. And something is not wrong with us. We are all in a nervous system state. We're all just trying to survive on any given day. And so that need to produce is going to come in. And so what the pendulum does is it lets you know that life is always there. It's just running. And it's going from hyper-aroused states to hypo-aroused states. And one will meet the other because we need this homeostasis in the center. So if you have a panic attack, you may dissociate. If you have like a lot of ruminations, you're probably going to feel overwhelmed and have decision paralysis, right? One will meet the other. And spoiler alert, we may see this in the body. We're still doing the research, so I don't want to ruin it or get too far ahead of myself before I can write that book. But know that this pendulum is happening. Grace is at the center, and then the metronome is just keeping the time. And what we're trying to build is a metronome for cadence, to position ourselves in a regular beat. And so Emma's going to help you go through that on Wednesday. So definitely subscribe to Emma as well. You see her all over my page. She will be tagged in this as well. So make sure you get that as our Wednesday article. So there's lots of support for you to have. And you'll want to journal with her as well. So wherever you're in your mind, is in the journal, in the chat, in the comments, I want you to finish this sentence. Lately, I have been producing from the soil of. Lately, I have been producing from the soil of, and that can be urgency, purpose, fear, pressure, resentment, scarcity, love, exhaustion, proving, anxiety, hope, over responsibility, avoidance, or even perfectionism. Fill in that sentence. It's not about judging the soil. It's not about locating it. A lot of us are not burned out because we are doing meaningless things. Sometimes we are burned out because we have too much going on and the soil is not mended. There's not enough nutrition in the soil. And that's not our fault. We're going to find out that it's not our fault. There's no shame and blame in any of this. It's not about quitting everything. Sometimes we just need to restore the ground you're standing on while you do what matters. And that's mending the soil. So this week, we're going to plant the seeds of the garden we are tending. And so what that looks like is if we are not tending what is beneath the soil, we may unknowingly keep tending intergenerational trauma. And that may sound heavy, but let's make it human. Intergenerational trauma does not pass through stories. It passes through patterns, through nervous systems, emotional rules, through the families that learn to avoid, to silence, to normalize, to overvalue, or fear. It sounds like we don't talk about that. Or stop crying. I'll give you something to cry about. We do not need help. We do not ask for help. That is very culturally normative in many, many cultures. Just for Carter. Do not embarrass this family. Do not embarrass me. Be grateful. Why can't you just be grateful? Other people have it worse. There are starving people in Africa right now. Keep the peace. Do not make anyone uncomfortable. Rest is laziness. Needs are weakness. Mistakes are dangerous. Your value is what you produce. All of those statements will become soils that we depend on, we pull from every single time performance comes in. Because once we're above the soil tending our garden, then we're present and letting life present. Remember, there's no hierarchy. There's no better place to be. I'm not teaching you how to get to Eden. Can't do that. There is no utopia on earth. All I'm saying is if you're present and letting life present, you're above the soil, you're kind of tending your garden. And you can get into a lot of stressors up there. Don't worry, you still got it. That second survival comes in, nervous system reaction comes in, you're going beneath the soil. And as you go beneath the soil, performance is being asked of you. And as you hit performance, perceived expectations, what I should and could do, what I expect people to do in this situation, and then all of these narratives. Spoiler alert, the output of that is self-doubt. We'll get to that later. But that's where this is all coming to. Is these statements are the soil and the quicksand of the mind that's going to come up. When you grow up in soil like that, because we've all had some kind of invalidating environment, there are 7 invalidating environments. And on Thursday, we're going to talk about all of those invalidating environments. And you're going to see below the pay wall, you're actually going to see what the invalidating environments are and what the solution is. How do you ground in the moment? How do you heal from it? This is all also part of Key Steps, Part 2, the workbook. One of the very first chapters, this is the things that you learn on these invalidating environments. And as you learn that these are invalidating environments and that we have all experienced at least 5 out of the 7 environments in our lives, most people have experienced all of them, we start to realize that we have become very capable of being responsible, intuitive, high achieving, aware of everyone else's needs, skilled to push through, to read the room. But internally, the nervous system is also learning that emotions can be too much, that needs are inconvenient, that safety depends on performance, belonging depends on being useful, mistakes threaten connection, and rest creates guilt, and boundaries will disappoint people. That's not just a mindset. That is the soil you are grounded in. When we tell you to ground, take those deep breaths, That's what you're grounded in, are all of these things. Your past occupying your present. Not because we're choosing harm, but because the familiar ground feels normal. Even when it's depleted, it is our homeostasis. It's what we have learned. And that will keep being planted in our work, our relationships, our goals, our leadership, our caregiving, all of it. That's what we're pulling from. And so as we learn more, you can read Neurohumanity Framework article on Thursday. So subscribe so you get it. It's a great read of all of the messages we're getting that are actually intergenerational trauma and reinforcing, invalidating emotional environments. So take a moment to be present with this. Take a deep breath, do another body scan, see what you're holding on to. Understand that we've been holding on to a lot of emotional rules that we've inherited, not because people said them out loud, but because some of the strongest rules were never spoken. They were just known. And so whether you want to put it in comments, you want to journal this, or just keep it in your mind, think about these and finish these sentences. In my family, emotions were. In my family, mistakes meant. In my family, rest was. In my family, needs were. In my family, conflict meant. And in my family, success meant. You may know some tenderness here. You may notice some grief. Maybe even a little bit of resistance. You may notice your brain wanting to say, it wasn't that bad. They did their best. I should be over it. I had a good childhood. And listen, two things can be true at mine. Two things can be true at the same time. The dualities of truth. You can love your family and still name the patterns. You can say that things need repair and be grateful and realize that it all shakes out in the wash, that we don't have to blame somebody. We can name something and not blame it. And you can understand that something is happening and not keep living from it. It's not dishonor, it's stewardship. And that is how we stop confusing loyalty with repetition. And so as we come back to looking at work as a place where old soil is showing up, what we see is there is these intergenerational soils that were actually being disguised as ambition. You say, I am just driven, but underneath there may be a fear that the only value you have is under what you produce. Or I am just responsible, but underneath there may be an old role where you had to hold everything together. Or I'm just helpful, but underneath is an old role where you had to create a belief that your needs will cost you connection. I just like to get things done right. And underneath, a nervous system that learned mistakes are not safe. Oh, my favorite. I am bad at resting, but underneath, you inherited guilt around slowing down. It's not about pathologizing your strengths. Your work ethic may be beautiful. It may make you very successful. Your caring may be incredibly real and authentic, and your leadership may be incredibly meaningful. Your contribution may matter deeply, but we want to ask, is this fruit growing from rooted purpose or from survival soil? Because survival soil can produce impressive fruit for a while, but it's pulling on your nervous system reaction. It's coming with hyperarousal. So eventually the cost will show up. The burnout will be there. The joy disappears, the resentment grows, and we stop learning why we did it in the first place. And that mind will loop over and over and over again. It's feedback loops. Relationships become transactional, and you feel useful but not nourished. You are producing but not living. And that is the soil asking to be mended. So how do we mend the soil? We begin with our AAA framework: awareness, acceptance, action. We notice the soil we are producing from, and not just what we're doing, but what is driving it. And am I working from fear, purpose, pressure, peace, guilt, scarcity, service, or survival? That's this lesson. Those are the opportunities I ask you to put in the journal. If you want to get into acceptance and action, you go beneath the paywall. You become a paid subscriber. You get the rooted model, that you book a coaching session. You start to find how this applies in your life. We stop shaming the pattern. It doesn't mean we approve of everything and stay stuck. We don't avoid it and say, well, we just don't go down that road. No. We learn that this is a nervous system reaction, and we can retrain our nervous system when we stop judging. It came from somewhere, and we can treat it here in the past. We don't have to open up old doors. That's why people don't want to go to trauma counseling. Like, I did that, and all I did was have a bunch of nightmares, because people asked you to go open doors that you didn't need to open. And they didn't realize how interconnected it was. They said, I got this training with EMDR. Just come, bilateral movements. Let's do this, right? And it will help for explicit trauma, but what we need to understand is implicit trauma is running our lives. And trauma are messages and narratives that we have picked up over high stress situation that our brain has coded as, I didn't know if we were going to survive that. Not because a gun was to our head, but because our mother had postpartum depression, not her fault. And she wasn't there to give you the bottle when you cried. Not anyone's fault. We're not blaming anybody, right? It's a thing that happens. But our brain said, I can't necessarily trust my caregiver to give me something because their emotions take over the space. And so I've learned from a very young age, concrete thought process. We're not thinking spatially until 9 to 12. Our first 3 years is nothing but implicit messages. These things are just being picked up for where we are at the developmental level. We picked it up on, and we've stored it. And we're using them today, even in our 70s, 80s, and 90s. We're still using the same messages that we learned back before we were even in puberty. That's the survival brain. That's the nervous system. That is neurohumanity. We let it all go. And then we get into action. And we learn my 20 years of clinical experience of what do we do with this? If behavior is predictable, then how do I show up? How do I build the responses to live with integrity, to be in the here and now? One little action step. So this week, what we're doing is I want you to notice where you are trying to force fruit from exhausted soil. Don't start by fixing it. Start by noticing it. Where are you pushing yourself past capacity? Where are you calling survival discipline? Where are you confusing over responsibility with love? Where are you living under emotional rules you never chose? Maybe taking a lunch break, ending work on time one day, naming one need without apologizing, pausing before saying yes, taking 3 breaths before answering an email that activates you. Learn the narratives that are driving this, because before you can produce more, we've got to restore the soil. That is what we do when we mend. That is the ownership we have. That is how we stop tending inherited trauma and start tending the life we're actually here to grow. I'm Jennifer Evans with Empowering Wellness Counseling Solutions. Thank you so much. Make sure that you subscribe, become a paid subscriber, get all of the worksheets. It is all of my clinical work right there at a very low cost per month. You are getting so much valuable information. Make sure you check out Emma on Wednesday. She'll be doing it from her feed live, 6:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. She's going to learn about this acceptance and the metronome. Have a good one.